The foundation of Putin's Russia is collapsing, and the first crack isn't on the battlefield, it's in the nation's economy, where its biggest employer is imploding, and on its own streets, where the very soldiers he sent to war are coming home to terrorize the population he can no longer control. The foundations of Putin's Russia are cracking under the immense weight of his war in Ukraine. What we are witnessing isn't just a military stalemate, it's the rapid and visible unraveling of an entire society. And it's happening right before the Kremlin's eyes. The first and most telling tremors are shaking the nation's economic core, where a collapse is now undeniably underway. Take the case of Russian Railways, the country's single biggest employer and a crown jewel of the state. This behemoth is now initiating waves of mass layoffs, a desperate move triggered by a catastrophic 95% nosedive in profits. This isn't just a corporate crisis. It's a national emergency forcing the Kremlin to foot the bill for billions it simply doesn't have. But this financial hemorrhage is making Putin deeply afraid, because his true enemy, the Russian people, are rapidly running out of both money and patience. However, the most immediate threat to the regime isn't just economic discontent, it's a wave of criminal betrayal brewing from within his own ranks. First, the Kremlin brazenly retroactively canceled massive bonuses promised to thousands of conscripts, leaving soldiers stranded, furious, and feeling utterly betrayed. Second, and far more dangerously, the convicted criminals Putin personally freed from prisons to serve as cannon fodder in Ukraine are now returning home, and they are unleashing havoc on the Russian population they were supposedly defending. Nearly 1,000 of these so-called veterans are now defendants in murder cases, terrorizing the very civilians they were meant to protect. The chilling reality is that no one in Russia wants these soldiers back. Putin is now trapped in a nightmare of his own making. He needs a constant supply of bodies to keep his war machine grinding forward, but he knows with terrifying clarity that if the war were to stop, this flood of traumatized, armed, and uncontrollable murderers would trigger a total internal collapse, turning the violence of the front lines inward on the Russian homeland. In fact, President Zelinsky exposed this brutal truth to the whole world during his recent visit to the United States. He articulated the central paradox that now defines Putin's rule. Let's listen to his analysis. Zelensky's words cut to the heart of the matter.
Enough pressure on him and he will be ready. In any way, he afraid of his society. More pressure on him and not so comfortable life for his nation. They will pressure on him. He afraid only of his society because he wants to be president till he will die. And that's why, of course, he needs society to support him. That's why he count on continuation of this war. And that is what the big question, big challenge for all of us. That's why I'm not sure that in Budapest he will be ready. But if, God bless, President will pressure on him, and if Putin will be ready for any format, again, I'm sorry that I'm repeating, any format of negotiations, bilateral, trilateral, any kind of, I think it will be good.
Putin's greatest fear is his own society. He is a leader who rules through a facade of strength, but that facade is crumbling under the pressure of a broken economy and a disillusioned populace. The collapse of Russian railways is a perfect microcosm of this decay. This isn't just about layoffs. Employees are also being forced to take mandatory unpaid vacations every single month. The reason is simple. The company's profits have evaporated. In the first half of this year, profits plummeted by 95% to a paltry 2.7 billion rubles, about $30 million. Now, that might sound like a lot to you and me, but for a company drowning in 2.7 trillion rubles of debt, around $35 billion, it's a death sentence. To make matters worse, thanks to Putin's disastrous economic management, Russia's interest rates are sky high, sitting at 21%. This means that in just a few months, Russian Railways is staring down a $7 billion interest payment. How do you make a $7 billion payment when you only made $30 million in 6 months? That's like someone making $10,000 a year being told they owe the bank $2 million. It's mathematically impossible, which is precisely why the layoffs are happening and why the state will be forced to print money or divert funds from elsewhere, fueling the inflationary fire. This government bailout is happening as the state's own revenues are drying up. Russia is regressing economically, transforming from a global energy station back into a Soviet-era state of scarcity. A staggering 84% of Russian regions are now facing severe gasoline shortages. This has forced many gas stations to simply stop selling fuel, and in some cases, drivers are finding their tanks contaminated with water, leading to scenes of complete chaos and breakdown. This pervasive shortage leads directly to Putin's other critical failure, the betrayal of his own soldiers. The Kremlin promised life-changing bonuses to entice men to the front lines, only to secretly pass a law retroactively canceling those payments. Imagine being a soldier, having signed a contract for $1,000,000 bonus, only to find your paycheck missing, and then being told the government has legally voided its promise. This isn't just a broken promise. It's a systemic deception that is creating a legion of furious, armed men who feel they have nothing left to lose. This is why the Kremlin is feeling uneasy about veterans returning home. But the most terrifying returnees are the convicts. Putin offered murderers and thieves a deal: fight for 6 months and walk free. Now, these hardened criminals are bringing the violence of the battlefield back to Russian streets. We're seeing report after report of road rage incidents, shootings, and brutal assaults where the perpetrator casually declares, "I don't give a f***, I'm from the SMO." These men, accustomed to solving problems with violence and flush with easy war money, are a powder keg of destabilization. Nearly 1,000 returned soldiers are now defendants in murder cases against Russian civilians. This is the reality of Putin's Russia today. A society falling apart at the seams, held together only by the continuation of a war that is simultaneously destroying it. As Zelinsky pointed out, this is why Putin may never be truly ready for peace. He needs the war as a pressure valve to keep these destructive forces away from his own doorstep. He will only stop if he is forced to, and that pressure, as the cracks widen, may ultimately come not from outside, but from within a Russian society pushed to its breaking point.